All right. Well, let's get started in season one, episode two.
Yeah, I like this. It's something new. It's something different. The first time we did it sitting across from each other, and now we're going to be staring at each other on cameras. I guess that's a little bit different, but I think this
And
will be this fun.
across the whole state line. So we'll have to give each other enough room to finish our thoughts before we jump in, since there's a little bit of a delay built in. That should be exciting and new for us.
I think that's good. That I think that'll keep us from stepping on each other, and as we get into some of the more controversial topics and stuff like that, like we're going to take on today.
Yeah, I don't think it gets much more
No,
timely or relevant or would you say controversial is what's going on right now in
I
Minneapolis and really
think divisive.
around the country, that we're seeing issues in more than just Minneapolis, but the media focus and the attention is more on what's going on in Minnesota right now. So
Absolutely,
we should open in prayer before we jump in.
I 100% agree.
All right.
Heavenly Father, we just thank you for the opportunity to come together and to just talk about these issues, Lord, that affect the body of believers, that affect each one of us, Lord, that we are passionate about. But we ask for your wisdom as we talk about these. We ask that we stay open, Lord, to where you would lead us, and that we stay respectful. And we always think about you and the way that you would have us believe and discuss as we take on these topics. And we just thank you for the opportunity to get together. In your son's name we pray.
Amen.
Amen.
So did you want to start with our two scripture references that kind of paint where we stand on this?
Well, first of all, let's introduce the topic.
Okay.
So today we're going to be talking about two different topics. One is the ICE incursion into Minneapolis and the job that they're taking on in rooting out illegal immigrants, especially violent offenders, et cetera, to do their job in Minneapolis, and the controversy that has stirred amongst both paid agitators and people that are indigenous to Minneapolis that are protesting the arrival of ICE agents into the city. And then two, the Somali led fraud that's going on in the state of Minneapolis, as they have built the system from somewhere between a couple of $100 million and as much as $9 billion, depending on who you talk to, making it one of the biggest scandals in American political history. So those are the two topics we're taking on today. And it is very divisive and it's interesting. And the one thing I'll say is, as we get started, is I think your view on this is almost entirely dependent, like so many things that are going on in today's age, on where you're getting your information. Because if we live life in this small bubble that we believe, then we're getting one side of a story. And so, because I tend to get a lot of my information from my conservative podcast that I listen to and from Fox News, I get one very distinct version of what's going on there. And Mike, you tend to have more of the CNN, MSNBC. You correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, it's where you're getting your information.
Well, yeah, and I don't know. I get my information from a lot of different sources. MSNBC got taken off the air for us here in the Buckeye cable system, so I don't even get MSNBC. So I find most of my stuff as I search online from different, and I try to be diverse as to which items I click on when I'm online doing information searches. So yeah, I mean, it's not as tunneled as what it would seem. I try to pick my sources smartly, but I would say I steer away from some of the ones that you're getting your information from, in that I'm not an OAN or a Fox News person. So I don't, but I do tend to click on those links to see what
Yes.
the other side is saying.
And I try to do the same. I try to click on CNN and MSNBC. I don't like watch it for hours and hours, but I'll look at the clips to see how it's being portrayed. And so it winds up being very interesting because you get two very starkly different views of what's happening. So I was just going to say, so the one thing that I would highly suggest is, as you look at these different subjects, I think it's critical that you try to find more than one, general area where you're getting your information, because I think it's imperative in this day and age that you take in both sides, that you have as much information as you can about a particular subject, so that you can make an intelligent, informed decision on where you stand.
Agreed.
Okay.
So
So
let's jump in. Let's start with the ice, because the Somali one, I don't think has the breadth that we're gonna try to explore in this time that we have together. So if we start with Minneapolis, I think that'll kind of lead into what, since they're both in Minnesota. So your thoughts on the ICE, you called it an incursion.
Well,
Your thoughts on,
almost did that tongue in cheek because I think that when you look at it, the federal authority allows ICE to go wherever they're having these issues. And when you look at what the American people voted for, and during the election in November, one of the tenets that he ran on was that he was going to crack down on the immigration. I don't think there's a lot of argument that during the Biden administration, the borders were pretty much open, and just about anybody could cross the border, either the Canadian side or on the Mexican border into our country. And we let in a lot of good people. And we let in some people that probably shouldn't have been let in, that weren't vetted, and we didn't know their background. We didn't know their criminal record and what they had done in their home countries, and yet we just allowed them in anyway. And I think Mike and we both agree on one thing, and that is that the immigrants have made this country. It has strengthened this country. I think one of our greatest values is that people can come from all different cultures all around the world, come to the United States, assimilate into our society, and make our society better, bringing all the things from their culture into it, which only enriches this country. I think the key piece of that is that you integrate into our society, that you don't try to necessarily make one little microcosm that is just yours and from your culture and never change. And even through generations, there's no assimilation. So I know that's a lot to kind of jump into, and but as an intro, I think it's important to kind of lay down some of that groundwork, because what ICE has been tasked to do is to go through and find the most violent people that could have come into this country during these last 4 years, and to root them out and prosecute them or send them back.
but I think I think when the president was campaigning on um, immigration, he was he was selling it more as a surgical apparatus where they would go in and find these. I mean, he used the term the rapists and the murderers and the drug lords and people that were coming in here to do harm to the country. And what I'm seeing right now is not a surgical strike event. It's more of a, they have roving patrols that are going into churches and schools and mosques and synagogues and pulling people out of there and arresting them and jailing them or incarcerating them as immigrants that are ne'er do wellers. And that isn't. I think when people voted, that isn't the picture that they were painting in their head. I don't think they thought of.
I haven't seen that at all. I mean, that's just not, I mean, again, I'm trying to take in as much information as I can. So I think anybody that did come across, our borders illegally, they have broken the law. And that is a crime, that you come into the country illegally. I believe that the intent is to go through, and everything that I've seen, everything I've heard from Holman, everything that I've seen from these ICE raids that I've seen, that I've been able to watch, they are trying to task to go after those violent criminals. Now, there's going to be collateral damage. There's going to be people that are going to be picked up that aren't violent, but they are illegal immigrants, and some of that is bound to happen when you're casting nets and you're trying to root out those violent criminals. But I haven't seen where they just randomly go in and start arresting people in a mosque. I haven't seen that one time. And again, I've tried
Well,
to get as much of this as possible. So this part I haven't seen.
it's the roving groups of ICE agents that's how we get to 2 dead people that were Minnesota residents that weren't part of an immigration issue. It's that when Bavino was there and was throwing smoke grenades into the crowd, and he was the person that was tasked with being in charge of that operation there, and they replaced him with a guy like Holman. I'm not sure that you have solved any problems with a change in leadership in that event. I don't think he is the answer to any question that got asked. So all you did was move the ball down the field a little bit further. You got rid of Bavino because he was the problem child, and Christy Nome is going to pay a price for that. He didn't address her at the last cabinet meeting. I mean, he's tipping his hand right there. She's probably on her way out, and she just doesn't even know it yet. And so, what issue gets solved by a change in leadership when you pull a guy like Bavino out and put Holman in? What does that solve?
Yeah, it's so weird
This is a
because
guy who was accused of taking $50,000 in cash, and he got uh, no charges filed, or maybe there were charges filed and they got dismissed. I don't remember what the end result. He's not prosecuted for it. In fact, now he's in charge of the ICE operation in Minnesota.
so let's go back on Tom Homan a little bit because again, I've not seen any evidence to show that he accepted any bribes or any money or anything like that. Obviously, he wasn't prosecuted in this country. We do try to operate under the guilty, innocent until proven guilty.
Do we?
Oh, again, I don't know anything about the $50,000, so I can't really speak to that. What I can speak to is the left really liked Tom Homan when he was doing this exact job under the Obama administration, and you see the pictures of Obama putting the Medal of Freedom around his neck and big smiles on their face, and he deported over 3 million immigrants during the Obama administration, and to the point where they called Obama the deporter in chief, and everybody allowed him. Everybody cooperated. These things went off without a hitch. Nobody was killed because authorities were cooperating with ICE, which was around back then, and everybody was happy with it. And the left loved it because he was Obama's guy and everything was wonderful. It's when Trump tried to do the same thing, then all of a sudden everybody's against him, and now Homan's the devil, and everything's awful, and Homan's out there trying to get people killed, and it's like that's not true. And if we look at those two instances of the two times that somebody lost their life, and let's start off with this, that is tragic. That should never happen. And I don't
Well,
I'm not
our thoughts and prayers are with the families. I mean,
without
that should solve everything.
no, it doesn't solve everything, but obviously nobody wanted to see that happen. But there's something fundamentally wrong right now. And this is where my verse comes in. And so I'll go ahead and start with this. And by all means, I want you to be able to get yours in as well. But Romans 13, verses 1, 2, and 3. Let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God. Consequently, whoever rebels against the authority is rebelling against what God has instituted. And those who do this will bring judgment on themselves. For rulers hold no terror to those who do right. But for those who do wrong, do you want to be free from fear of the one in authority? Then do what is right, and you will be commended. So as I look at this, one of the things that we all used to agree on is that we agreed that law enforcement was here to help us, to protect us, to serve us. And there was a general thought in this country that they are us, we are them, we support them, and they're good people. And it seems like that has gone out the door. And I can't imagine being in a position where I would go out and try to stop law enforcement from doing their job. It would be the same as if I decided that I was going to follow police officers from their home and go there and wait for them outside the station. And when they left to go and do their job, I would literally get in their way. And I would try to stop them from going in and arresting somebody because that's what is happening. The gentleman that was just shot, the last one, I can't think of his name right now.
Freddie.
He actually got out and tried to get in front of officers that would go up to the door to knock on it. And the person that they were trying to arrest was a rapist, and he tries to stop them. Why in the world would we do? How is that peaceful protest? I believe strongly in our Constitution and the right to assemble, I believe that we have the right to protest. I think we should. Americans have the right to have a say in these things, and so I'm strongly behind all that. That's not what's going on. They should not be allowed to follow officers. They should not be allowed to know where they live and seek that out. That is a fundamental problem. Everybody's upset at ICE officers for wearing masks. Why are they wearing masks? Because they're being targeted. When is that all right? They can't do that. That is why people are put in harm's way. You should never be in a position to stop an officer from doing their job. That's a felony. And I just think that the individuals that are doing that should be arrested. It's a terrible thing. So I believe God calls us to have respect for our law enforcement and for our leaders. When Obama was president, he was my president. When Biden was president, he was my president. When law enforcement officers are out there doing things, whether I 100% agree with them or not, they are still the authority. And if they tell me to stop my car, I stop my car. If they tell me to get out of my car, I get out of my car. If they tell me to lay down face flat, and that has happened in my life, and I have done that. Now, why all of a sudden no one thinks that you have to abide by those rules of engagement? And in both of those cases, they were fighting with the authorities. Don't do that. I mean, again, I don't want anybody to lose their life, but why are you putting yourself in harm's way to have your life taken? Your thoughts?
Well, I think if you take a screenshot of, because the encounter that Preddy had with the officers that ultimately assassinated him, that wasn't the same group that was getting followed around by him. It was that you have to take the information that those people had, that those officers had at the time of the encounter that they had with Preddy. And the woman got pushed to the ground. He turns to us. This is a nurse that works at a VA hospital whose whole career is built around helping people that are in need. He bends down or reaches down to help this woman get back up again. The ICE officers are on top of him. He has a sidearm or a gun tucked into. Now he has a legal right in the state to carry a gun. He has the permit. So he's allowed to have a gun on him according to the law of Minnesota and the Constitution. They see a gun, they remove the gun from him. The officer is seen walking away from Peretti on the ground with officers on top of him, and then he's shot once, not to stop, hang on, not to stop the assault, not to stop the aggression of Peretti. He's on the ground and in control, and they shoot him 10 times. He has 10 holes in him, and he's unarmed at the time that the shooting starts. I don't know how you justify or mitigate or minimize the responsibility, and those officers, the training is 40 hours or 40 days of training to be an ICE officer in a hostile situation in a high tension city that is in turmoil right now, and undertrained or ill trained, or I don't even know the term I want to use, not prepared to be in the position that they're in dealing with the public. And this guy pays for it with his life.
So let's go back to that for 1 second, because there's one thing that I do want to talk about. Alex and I are doing our concealed carry permit classes, and so it's we're taking them in February. But I've been briefing through the materials, and I would say 90% of this training is about not putting yourself, when you're carrying a firearm, not putting yourself in any situation where there can be an altercation. So if you're going to have a sidearm, you do not protest, you do not fight, you do not go to bars and and do drinks or go to parties and stuff like that, where you're going to be drinking alcoholic beverages and stuff like that, because that can put you in a situation where you could make a mistake. You could go for that sidearm in a way that you shouldn't. Anybody that is abiding by the rules of engagement through concealed carry in Minnesota or any other state, do not bring them to a time where you're going to be protesting and getting into an altercation with a police officer or an ICE agent. And he did that, breaking every rule of engagement when you go through concealed carry. He was
Okay,
not.
so how do you marry that statement with January 6th when the insurrection at the Capitol happened and there were armed people there pushing barricades down and attacking police officers and gaining entrance into the Capitol where they had no
There's a lot
business
of
being?
there's a lot of things with January 6th that are lies.
Well, that's gonna okay. So my takeaway from this whole encounter is, so who gets to decide when concealed carry, the constitutional right,
Mike,
is
if there were
appropriate?
on January 6th that were armed and they were taking part in that, they should absolutely be arrested for that. They should. You should go to a
They
protest.
were, but they were pardoned en masse. The entire insurrection group was
Like
pardoned by the
everything that
same
I've seen,
president. Pardon
everything
me?
I've seen from that was a peaceful protest. There were people there were agitators that were put in that crowd to cause all kind to stir up a lot of garbage and make that whole thing look bad, to make it an impeachable offense. I believe that. I 100% believe that. I do. I believe that. I believe it was to be a peaceful protest. I don't think that's what we're seeing right now in Minneapolis. I don't. But I'm going to stay consistent on the point. No one should bring a gun to a protest. No citizen should be more important.
I think the NRA has a problem with that statement. I mean,
But the NRA helps put all these rules together. The NRA does not want you to have a gun on your hip and go in and get into any type of altercation, a planned altercation. That you absolutely should not do that. That is a last line of defense to save your life. Period. That's what concealed carry is all about. It's to stop somebody who wants to take your life. That's why you have a concealed carry. That's why you have people that go to churches that have concealed carry in case somebody comes in and there's an active shooter in the church. You need somebody there that could then respond as a last line of defense. That's what that should be. You should not bring that to a place you know you're going to be in an altercation. You're going to a protest to stop ICE agents from doing their job. You know you're going to get in their way. That was the plan all along. You don't bring a gun to that. You don't, because that's when you get shot. These
I think
officers
you're
get killed in the line of duty all the time. Our officers do all over the country. They're put in horrible circumstances. You get somebody that's going to get in an altercation with you when they're armed, everything is heightened. Again, I'm not trying to take away from the fact that shouldn't have happened. But this is not somebody that was standing on the sideline with a sign saying that we oppose what ICE is doing, because that is absolutely condoned and we should be doing that. They should not be going out there and getting violent fisticuffs and getting in the way of these agents from being able to perform their duties. They shouldn't do it.
I don't know. I think you're asking for somebody to draw a razor thin um, guideline, or you're asking them to make decisions in the moment, and I think that's too fine of a line. That's my takeaway on it. I think the challenge that I have is it's the Constitution is either right or it's not. The Constitution says you can carry a concealed weapon depending on what the state laws are as far as when and where and how and what documentation you have to have on you, or if you need any at all. And I think if you're asking people to make those determinations in the heat of the moment, you've already gone past where reasonable thinking has any chance of ruining the day, or of being followed.
So let me ask you a question. If let's say hypothetically you have a concealed carry. You've gone through the class. The class is very, very clearly stated that there are times when you should carry and there are times where you should not be carrying, a sidearm in any way, shape, or form. And you know that if you're going to be in an altercation, you know if you're going to go to a bar and you're going to be having drinks and stuff like that, that you should not have a firearm with you under any circumstances. When you're going to a bar, when you're going to a party where alcoholic beverages are consumed, when you're going into an area or a circumstance where you know violence is likely or could be likely to happen, you don't put yourself in that circumstance, because only bad things can happen when you're in that circumstance and you have a sidearm with you. And a protest where you plan on engaging with law enforcement officers would definitely qualify. I don't think this asking too, I don't think it's a fine line at all. I think there's a very clear line of distinction. You don't bring a gun to an altercation, and
I think
he
you're
knew he was going to be in an altercation.
I think we need to be careful with making assumptions as far as what was in Mr. Peretti's mind when he left his house that morning and was out on the street. He was in his own neighborhood. I mean, he lives somewhere in close proximity to where the event took place. I don't know that we could just summarily say that he knew he was going to engage police officers. I know that now there's video surfaced where he had this same person was in an altercation with police sometime prior, like 10 days before this event took place or something. I don't remember the exact timeline, but I think it's premature, or it's troubling to make an assumption about what was going through his mind at the time this event took place. All we know for sure from what we saw in the video was a woman got pushed down to the ground and he helped her back up again, and then the ICE agents turned on him and took him to the ground, and he was, ultimately he paid with his life
And,
for
and,
being
and
at
I
a protest.
understand what you're saying, and I do. I agree with you. Maybe it is premature for me to know or to think that I know what he was thinking when he went out to that protest that day. But when I see pictures of him standing in front of ICE agents, trying to block them from getting to, I got to believe that he knew that he was going to do that again. And if he thought that even there was 1% chance that he would try to stand in front of those ICE agents, you don't bring a firearm. You don't, because every rule that he went through when he signed off and went through those classes for concealed carry. And he was a licensed carrier, which means he went through those classes. And each one of those classes will have certain things that are in common. It doesn't matter from state to state. And making sure you don't bring that gun to a possible area where you could wind up in an altercation is a clear sign. So, but I will acquiesce that point. I think you're right. It's premature for me to know that he knew he'd get into an altercation.
Well,
But thinking,
I'm not trying to minimize what his intent was or what his purpose was for being there. I know that to me, as in a cursory look, I don't know if he walked everywhere he went. Did he live close to the hospital, the VA hospital where he worked, and he was just used to riding a bike or walking? And most of his travels, if he lived in the urban area around the hospital, is probably he walked to work or he walked to the market. Or so, do we know where he was headed that day or where he was coming back from? That he was carrying his concealed carry weapon on him because he was walking from the VA hospital to the market to get groceries and was headed home, and he encountered this ICE operation? Or did he go out and search out where these ICE officers were performing their duties and decided to insert himself in the middle of this? The first image that we see on the camera is they approached the curb in front of that white car where he was at and the woman was at. They were spraying a bear spray, or what's the chemical they use? Mace. And then the woman gets knocked to the ground, and he tries to help her up. That's all we know is from 20 seconds or 30 seconds, and a lot got decided in 30 seconds, all the way up to the point where he's unalived and on his way to the morgue, and the ICE officers move on with their operation. So I don't know what the circumstances were. I don't have enough information to make a determination as to
yeah,
whether or not he was right or wrong. I just know that either the Constitution says you can carry a sidearm on you and you have the legal right to have that weapon on you by the Constitution, or it doesn't. And the NRA says you do. And President Trump says, no, not if you're going to a protest. You should not have a gun. Okay, well,
but that's not
what's a
Trump saying.
protest?
Those are the actual classes. That is the curriculum. And the NRA will say that too. The NRA just doesn't say that you should have a gun on you at all times. That's not what the NRA says. The NRA signs up on these classes. They want responsible gun ownership and a
I'm
big
not saying the NRA, I'm saying the
education.
Constitution.
Well, the Constitution of the United States allows you to bear arms. Absolutely. Concealed carry is a very important piece of that. But you take the classes. You don't that doesn't give you the to just do whatever you want whenever you want, to take it out and wave it around in a crowded theater or anything like that. You can't just put everything under that. We have to be discerning individuals that know that if you take a gun into a hostile situation, bad things will happen. And so therefore, when Alex and I go through and we finish this class, my wife and I, we will have the right to bear arms and wear a concealed weapon on us. It will be up to us to know that if we're going to go into a situation where we're going to a protest, we're going to, a bar, we're going to something. And I use bar just because that's where a lot of bad things happen in those circumstances, because people are drinking alcohol and people get upset. Next thing you know, there's pushing and shoving. The next thing you know, somebody's got a gun out. You don't bring a gun into those circumstances. If you know you're going to a protest, you don't bring a gun. If you know you're going to stand in front of a law enforcement officer and try to stop them from doing what they're supposed to do, you don't bring a gun. You don't, because bad things are going to happen. So I'm not saying that it was right that he was shot. And I understand what you're saying. I think the Second Amendment's a very important piece of our Constitution. It's one of the Bill of Rights that I strongly believe in. But at the same time, you have to be discerning. The classes are very clear in how you should handle concealed carry, and he took those classes, and he knew he shouldn't have brought a gun to that, and he did it anyway. He knew he was going to a protest. That's my belief. Now, if I'm proven wrong on that one, I can't wait to see the evidence, because everything that I've seen looks like he was going to a protest, and he had gone to many of these. He's a protester. It's what he does. That's a good thing. I think we need people that protest. We do. We can't allow our government to go unchecked. We are the people. We the people control our government, or we should. So that's a piece of who we are. So I want to hear your verse, because you heard mine. I love your verse.
Because it's going to sound like it's the antithesis or anti your verse, but
No,
it
not at
just,
all.
it just, so Philippians 2, 3, and 4 says, Do nothing from selfishness or empty conceit, but with humility of mind, regard one another as more important than yourselves. Do not merely look out for your own personal interests, but also the interests of others. It kind of speaks to that others, putting others ahead of yourself and being humble and caring for people. When I was in prison, you came to visit me, and when I was hungry, you fed me, and when I didn't have any clothes, you. So so my takeaway from where we're at right now, not just in Minneapolis, but in government as a whole, is that we've lost empathy. We don't have an empathetic leadership element at all. And so when you take that away, when you take the I'm here to serve both sides of the aisle, if anything, I believe President Trump has done a remarkable job of drawing the line between those that are on the team and those that are not on the team. If you're on the right side of government and you support him, and it's loyalty to him that drives the bus. If you're loyal to him, then then uh, then you can see progress, and you're probably happy with the way things are going. But if you speak out against him, or you're not a MAGA, I consider myself to be a conservative, social conservative, but not a MAGA conservative. So I live outside of the good grace of what our president is doing for the country right now. And even in my own church as a whole, there are people who are marginalized by the fact that we aren't Christian enough because we don't follow or bend the knee to the leadership that's in place right now. And in fact, I would even go so far as to say most Christians, I don't trust most Christians anymore. I don't, because we've so tied ourselves to one party as opposed to serving others and taking care of those that are marginalized, those that are in need. We've given that up. We sold that when we put this man in charge. And because I don't feel that way, I'm less of a Christian than all of my brothers that I sit on. So I just sat in a Sunday service with people who most of them feel very differently about what's going on right now. And I'm made to feel less Christian than they are because I feel the way I feel. And that's troubling.
And that's wrong.
That hurts my heart.
That
Well,
should
I mean,
that
and
should
it's
never
me.
happen.
It's me. It's my burden. It's something that I have to work through. It's something that I have to come to terms with and figure out how to get on the other side of. Because I still do church with these people. We still do home group with these people. These people are my people. They are Christ followers. They love Jesus and they want good for people. We just differ on how we think we should go about doing it or getting it done, and our choice in who we're having do it.
It troubles my heart that you're going through that because at the end of the day, that has nothing to do with our Christianity. Nothing. I mean, what we believe obviously does, but a politician does not. When Jesus was confronted with these types of things, and Sadducees and the Pharisees were trying to trip him up, and they would try to pin him down on all these things that that they thought would trip up his theology, and he comes back when they kept talking politics, 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 and says, give Caesar what is Caesar's, because they were talking about taxation and stuff like that in Rome, and Rome's being their head and all that stuff, and they were Jews, and so they were trying to trip him, and he said, no, I'm not about politics, that's not why I'm here. He's about people, he's about the lost, he's about making heaven crowded.
So
He
where do
didn't
you
care
see
about
that?
politics.
Where do you see that right now in government? I mean, I know
I
we're not supposed to rely on the government to solve all of our woes. That's what the church is for. That's what the fellow Christian is for. But how do you marry those two things together? How do you say we're supposed to take care of widows and orphans when we're sending them to CCOT and we're splitting up families and we're deporting some and not others? And how do you justify those two things at the same time?
So first off, sorry, I was going down a different road. I was going to come back with something else. When I look at Christians right now, the one thing that I would say is I think that we have to make sure that we understand who the Jesus is that we worship. And if you believe somebody's less of a Christian because they don't believe in Donald Trump being the end all be all as a president of the United States, then I think we're way off base on who Jesus is in our life, because Jesus isn't Republican. He's not American. He's not white. This guy is not about politics. I believe that there are probably every bit just taking the United States, not even looking at a worldview, because you've got a worldview outside the 380 million Americans, that if we believe that God only believes the way we believe in politics in the United States as a conservative Republican, not as a Christian, but as a conservative Republican, then you're missing about 99% of the world's population and all of their beliefs. And God is about everybody. So I 100% agree. That's trouble, because at the end of the day, I don't think God could care less which way you vote, other than the fact that he will have an input on who our government is run by. So if this is God's plan, then it's God's plan. I'm going to get behind it. I'm going to respect authority. To go back to that, I believe as a country, we do try to take care of widows, orphans. I believe that the church as a whole is still very much about that. In this particular case, yes, when it comes to immigration, there are going to be things that happen where a child is separated, or a couple is split up. That's why we have due process. That's why we have laws. That's why we have the immigration policies that
Well, wait
that
a
we.
minute. You said due process. These people are being deported without any due process at all. Not citizens. If they're in this country, are constitutionally guaranteed the same rights. That is a
No,
fact.
no, the Constitution guarantees citizens, not people that came here illegally.
But you
There's
have to
nothing in there
determine
about
whether
people
or not that
visiting our
person
country.
is a citizen or not before you can determine whether or not they get sent back to whatever country, don't you? I mean, don't you have to know who you're dealing with? If there's some circumstance that allows them to be here legally or not, there has to be some way to determine who the person is before you as a circuit court judge that's determining whether or not you can stay or be deported.
Do you
That
believe
dude,
anybody
that
really being deported that has full citizenship in this country? Because I don't. I believe that there are probably very, very, very few cases that are out there where somebody's been sent, an American citizen is being sent back to a country that they're not a citizen of. I don't believe that that's happening. I really don't. I believe in the process of doing their job, that there are probably people that we want to keep here in this country because they're hardworking people, and they should have a path to citizenship. And I believe that we need to change our immigration laws. I believe that there has to be some type of amnesty for people that have been here for at least 5 years and have gainful employment, and aren't bilking the system, and they're not breaking the laws. They're good people that because we need to grow our population. We need people that are in the trades. We need people that are working hard. We need people. We need immigrants to come in. We do not have enough people to fill all the jobs that are available in this country right now. And our economy is not going to grow if we don't have good people. I think we need to change all that. And I believe that the next president needs to be somebody that takes a good hard look at our immigration policy and right sizes that immigration policy. But right now, we have an immigration policy. We have rules. Those rules have been voted on by both Democrats and Republicans, and those are the rules. This is the way, this is the path to citizenship. They break those rules. They come into this country anyway, many of them unvetted. And so we let a lot of people in we shouldn't have. To stop the crime that's happening, to stop individuals from doing really bad things to our citizens, I believe that there should be deportation of illegal immigrants that have any violent tendencies and breaking the law, period.
I
And
don't
so
there is
they
no
should.
part of me that disagrees with any part of that. That if you have a case where but I think that is the due process I'm talking about, is the person stands before you, they plead their case, you make a determination, is this person a violent criminal? Then he should be deported. He has no business being here. He's not a US citizen, send him back. But I don't
And a
think
lot of the people they've gone
but
after have deportation orders already signed by a court. And they were protected in these cities that basically said they were sanctuary cities. And so they protected violent criminals in some manners, but criminals nonetheless that have deportation orders, and they just don't enact the laws of the land. And so
okay,
ICE
those
comes
those
to
aren't the
enact the law.
people we're arguing about then. That's not my I'm talking about people just in general that there was so that sounds to me like somebody already had their due process. The determination has been made. Now it's just a matter of executing the process of sending them back to their country. That's not who I'm talking about. I'm talking about the guy that's getting drug out on his front porch in his boxers, and there's been without due process that person is being detained, and then so where is his due process? Where is his are his rights being protected? Does he stand before a judge and have an opportunity to say, "This is who I am. This is what I'm about. I am a US citizen and I can prove it. I just couldn't do it in the living room while the ICE agents were dragging me out of my front door." And then let me ask you this, Tom. How do you justify immigration policies when Nicki Minaj can pay $1 million and get a gold Visa card and become a US citizen because she paid the fee? Does she get due process? Do they go back to Tobago and what's the other island? Trinidad and Tobago and find out why is she here? I mean, why does she want to be a US citizen? Was she born here by parents that came from there and she has a right to be here? So she pays her fee to Donald Trump $1 million to get a gold card and then supports him. He marches her out there and parades her out in front of the crowd to show that she's a supporter of his. How do you marry that? Or you
So
take
one
a
of the things
drug deal or
that immigration policy should do is it should be an increase to our economy. It should be a positive effect on our economy. So letting people in that have the means to pay that fee is a good thing. A, you're bringing in income by charging the fees. You're gonna raise money that's not coming from the taxpayers. But two, and more importantly, you're having people come in that have means and are going to spend money because when you move into a new country, you have to buy a home. You're usually not sending your car up here and stuff like that. So you're purchasing cars, you're purchasing furniture, you're purchasing a new wardrobes and all these different things. All that stuff is taxed. That's a boom for the US economy every time somebody with means moves into our country. And we're not the only country that's doing that. When you look at Denmark, Norway, the Netherlands, all these countries from the West that we have put up as the models of democratic liberalism over all these years, they're now saying that if you're crossing in, we're going to take a chunk of whatever it is you have, whether it be diamonds, whether it be cash, whatever. They're taking that to help support what they're doing in their country because they can't afford the immigration that's come into their country anymore. And so even they are doing that. And here's a case where you've got people that have money. Now, they also had to earn that money. Many of them own businesses, that they're entrepreneurs at heart. That is going to be a net benefit to our economy. It's not somebody that's going to come in and go on public assistance and need all the welfare and stuff like that and not learn our language and all these different things. These are immigrants you want. At the end of the day, when I look at immigration policy, I want the people coming into this country that are going to help fill out the jobs that we need. And that's what I'm for. I am all for good immigration.
so what I hear is, if we buy your albums, you're good for us, then you can come in. But if you don't make enough money and you can't help us, then you can't. I mean, it's a two class. You've now separated the haves from the have nots and said you can afford to come here, then you're welcome to
Okay.
be an
All right.
immigrant. We want
Because
those immigrants because
I'm
they're
probably not putting
sexy
it
and they
right.
sell gold albums. But if you can't afford it, we'd
So if
rather
that
you stay in
is
Venezuela.
seeing it, Mike, then I have not explained that very well. Because when I talk about you specifically asked me about the people that would pay for the $1 million gold cards. That is my argument for the $1 million gold cards. It's a boom for our economy. That's why he's doing it. I think it's a good thing. And I also talked about the people that are going to add to our economy because they work. And we need those people every bit as much. We need people to come in here. And I'm not saying that the jobs we don't want. No, that has nothing to do with any of that. If you come here and you're going to work and you are going to try to make this a better place, I want you here. I do. We need to make the process easier. I believe that. I think there needs to be a certain amount of amnesty, especially if you've already had kids born here. I think there needs a path to citizenship, but let's do it legally. Let's change the laws to make it better. Let's change the laws to make it a little more liberal. I'm all for that. But right now we have laws on the books, and I think we have to have a hard look at the people that came across. The issues that we're going to have in California and Texas is immigrants that are coming through and just bilking the system are going to bankrupt those states. I'm not doing it because I don't love those people. I'm not doing it because I don't want to see them come to a knowledge of Jesus Christ and have a good life for their children. I'm doing it because, or saying it because we have citizens in this country that are homeless and on the streets, and we can't afford to take care of that. And look at the amount of money that we're spending. Chicago is in such horrible shape right now. They're $1 billion deficit right now for their plan. They're a sanctuary city. They let all of those immigrants come in there, and they are absolutely tanking the economy of Chicago. They can't afford it. So you're going to take a great city like Chicago and you're going to relegate it to be a shell of what it could be because it can't afford to do anything anymore. They're not going to be able to fix their bridges. They're not going to be able to fix their roads. They're not going to be able to do anything in that city because they've allowed one class of people to come in and take from the system, and now they won't be able to afford it. I lose you guys?
What's that? You there?
Yeah, sorry. Sorry, that was my soapbox for a minute, but I just wanted to make sure that there was a delineation. I'm not saying if you're not rich, you don't belong here. If you're working and you're trying and you're doing what it takes, I am all for you being here. Let's do it legally.
I think this is the baby in the bathwater type of a situation. I think we suffer greatly in that we haven't figured out a way to determine a path forward for those of the immigrants that can't afford to pay the fee, and that's troubling. I don't think that's the way that the system was set up to be. You're right. We need reform, um, but I think it has less to do with protective borders or safe borders, and it has more to do with the immigration policies and how we determine who becomes a U.S. citizen and who doesn't.
Well, let me make one last point because I do want to cover the Somali piece. And that is, why is it that we're only seeing these problems in Minneapolis and we're not seeing the issues that we're seeing in Minneapolis anywhere else? You know, they go down to Memphis. Memphis is a democratic city. I don't know if it's a sanctuary city or not, but you're not seeing law enforcement that's against ICE. You're seeing cooperation. And because they're seeing cooperation, they don't have to go out and try to snag people. The local police forces are helping them and making it easy for them to do their job, and therefore you don't have these issues. No one's being shot in these other cities. There's just not having the same problem. Why is it Minneapolis specifically where all of these massive problems are going on?
I think it has more to do with the tactics than it does policy. I think nobody wants to have their city have 3,000 ICE agents dropped off and control of the city taken away from your local police force, people that live in the city and do business in the city and the local police force. Nobody likes to have that authority usurped by a government entity that comes in and just overruns your city. I think the sheer volume and the way they took over that city has a lot more to do with the results they've gotten so far than the policy of how they do that has. It's my belief that if you remove those ICE agents out of that city and sent them away, and they could have done, like I said, I think they could have done this much more surgically in their tactics and how they went about rounding up the violent criminals that they went into the city to get. That's not what we ended up with. We ended up with roving patrols of ICE agents that were randomly stopping cars and asking for pay. We need to see your papers. What does that sound like to you? If you were a
I think
citizen
I
in
have not,
Minneapolis,
all the reporting I've seen, I'm not seeing any of that. I'm just
that's
not
all
seeing
you
it.
see.
But okay, apparently you need to send me some of that stuff because I'm not seeing that. And the issue that I have is why aren't we seeing that in Washington D.C. where you had that huge, not National Guard, all those ICE agents, no problems. You saw it in Memphis, you've seen it in Louisiana, you've seen it in all these other states that ICE has come in. It's not just the numbers because they've had large numbers of ICE agents in many other cities, but the police aren't working against them. And when you combine that with what's going on in Minneapolis, a mayor who's under fire for allowing this huge amount of fraud that's come into that state and into his city, and the campaign contributions that he has taken from the individuals that helped facilitate all of that, and a governor who was steeped in this and tried to quiet down any dissent, any whistleblowers that would try to bring any of this to light, and targeted them because they were trying to show the fraud that was going on, the potential $9 billion or more potential. We'll see how all this stuff shakes out, but all of that's going on. He decides not to run anymore. All all the attention from the nation was on them because of this fraud. And right then, all of this happens. And all of the attention goes away from the fraud and all the attention winds up on ICE. Doesn't the timing on that in the exact same city where most of this fraud was going on, it was just, is that mere coincidence? I don't think so. I think when you look at what the mayor Fry and what Governor Walz has done to shift all the focus away from their issues onto ICE, I think it's a very clear thing that they're doing. I really do. I think they're trying to defer all the attention away from everything that they've done, and they're trying to put it on ICE and on Trump. And no more so than when Waltz came out and they were asking them about the fraud, and he brought up the white men. I don't know why or how it had anything to do with it, but white men, they have fraud too. So he was blaming Trump and white men because of all the fraud going on in Minneapolis. And I'm just like, I'm sorry, I don't know what you're talking about. It has nothing to do with what you're talking, but that's his way of coping with it. And it's just bizarre. This has been the craziest case. I can't believe everything that's going on. And unfortunately, it has created a situation where it's all about politics because it's us against them and all of that. And both sides are doing it and both sides are engaging it. I'm not saying that Trump didn't have a lot to do with this. And I believe that he probably overstepped a little bit in doing everything that he's done. So I'm not
I
blaming
think
all of this.
the level, it's hard to find the bar for where the level of chaos, where it crosses acceptable to not acceptable. We are living in a time unprecedented with the amount of just the sheer volume of things that are going on. The tearing down the White House and building this Arc de Triomphe with Trump's name on it, and renaming the Kennedy Center, and Venezuela, and bombing drug runner boats, and kidnapping the president of Venezuela and bringing him over here. It's just, you never know where to look because there's never going to be a moment where you can draw a breath in. You're always exhaling, and it's been that way for a year. Just the sheer level of activity going on, and if you believe in anything about Project 2025 and the Heritage Foundation and what they're up to, I think you have to
Yep,
at least read the document and find out what the footprint is or what the game plan is for what they want to accomplish. And it fits. There's a lot of it that fits. And part of it is we have to keep so much going on. And then when you marry in the Epstein files and where we're at with that, any level of distraction to take away from that document is paramount, it would seem. I'm not saying that there's a any information in that file that is a gotcha moment for anybody. I don't care who it is, whether it's Bill Clinton and Hillary, or it's Donald Trump, or it's Epstein, or it's the Doge guy, Elon Musk. I don't care who it is. But if you did something illegal where it comes to trafficking or sex crimes against these young girls, I don't care who you are, you should pay for that.
I
And if they
agree.
have a document, Pam Bondi said that document and the list of all the people that were named in the document were on her desk, and now she can't find it. Well, you know what? Which is it? Do you have the document or don't you? Are you investigating these people or are you not? The problem that I have right now is the Department of Justice, the three branches of our government are one right now. And I have a problem with that because that's not how our forefathers designed it. The legislative branch and the executive branch and the judicial branch were supposed to work independent of each other to keep each other accountable. And when they sit in the same room and they investigate the same thing at the same time, then that autonomy, that independence goes away. And as soon as you marry those three together and you have one person that's making the decision for all three branches, you've lost what our founding fathers thought was the best way to run a government.
And I
So
agree that the
when the level of
separation of
chaos is
powers.
where it's at right now, you can't squelch out all that noise and find out, what's the point? What's the goal that we have for this situation? Well, there's no way to figure out what the goal is because you can't hear it. Because there's too much going on, too much surrounding noise around it going on, where you can't draw your focus on anything.
I couldn't agree with you more on the separation of powers. I think that that's one of those things that really differentiate our government from a lot of other governments. And I do think that it's important to separate that. And I also thought of that during Trump's first administration when it seemed like the Department of Justice and Congress and everybody was working against him to try to bring about all these charges and try to make sure that they got that felony so that he couldn't run for reelection again and do all these things to stop him. And it was the Department of Justice and everybody working in tandem to go up against him. And again, I feel weird because I feel like I'm always defending Trump, and I don't believe that everything he does is right. I don't. I'm against certain things that he does, but at the same time, I also don't feel like I can throw out everything he does because I disagree with one of the things that he does. When you talk about some of the things blowing up these boats, stopping fentanyl from coming into this country and killing hundreds of thousands of American citizens is a good thing. Stopping fentanyl from hitting our shores at any cost I think is a very good thing. These are drug runners bringing in fentanyl that can kill people. And yet you have this huge swath of American politics that hate Trump so much. That's now a bad thing that was done. Stop fentanyl. It has to be stopped. This stuff is laced with things that are killing Americans in absolutely ridiculous numbers. If this was a war and we lost 100,000 people, it would be an unbelievable war. But because of drugs, we just pass it off like it's no big deal. These are our countrymen that are dying like this, and no one seems to care. Trump is trying to stop it. That's one thing we should all celebrate. Maduro was somebody that was actively working against our every interest, trying to help the Chinese, trying to get them a base of operations, trying to make it so China could even have first strike capabilities against us long term. There's so many things that went into what Maduro was doing and taking in all the Russian, missiles and everything like that, actively trying to hurt this country, and at the same time oppressing his countrymen. This is a country that has unbelievable wealth of resources. Their citizens should be rich. And because we go and take this guy out when he lost the election and stayed in power anyway, the US does the right thing in that case to have that guy removed. Now, should we meddle in foreign affairs?
You're saying it's the right thing to go into their country and kidnap him and bring him over here and put him in our prison. You think that was the right tactic in solving the issue?
This is the only reason I say yes. When you looked at the universal acceptance and celebrations throughout all of Venezuela, and even the Venezuelan communities that are in the United States, and everybody universally praised the fact that we did it because we unleashed that terror from their country by removing Maduro. And if I didn't see that, because at first I'm like, oh my gosh, what are we doing? But I watched that celebration. I watched everybody. All right, we went into Germany and we took out, you know, a bad person. We went
We
into
were at
Japan
war.
out
We were at
a bad
war at
people that did all these unspeakable things in Manchuria. Well, look at Maduro's track record. Look what he's done. The guy is a thug. He's a cartel chief. And he's in charge of an economy that should be the jewel of South America.
So
And
why
because
don't we
he's
go
stealing
into
everything for himself.
why don't we protect Ukraine and go in and take Putin and kidnap him and bring him over here and throw him in jail for the atrocities that he's performing against his people or the people of Ukraine or the
Nukes,
people in Russia, the people that fall out of
inter-
hospital windows.
intercontinental ballistic missiles would be a good answer.
I'm just saying, where do you draw the line? Because now there's no line. We went into a foreign country and kidnapped their head of state and brought them to our country. Where does that guideline do you use from this point moving forward as far as what happens if a country like uh, I don't know, England says, "Hey, we need some help. The King of Scotland has kind of lost his rocker, and we don't want to go in there and take him out because we share a border. We'd like you to come over and take care of this problem for us." How do we say no? Well, you did it for Venezuela, and all under the
Yeah,
auspices that we were
it's
trying to
an
stop the
interesting point
drug
that you make.
trade. And Trump pardons a guy who's a drug dealer because he's the son of a dignitary, and he gets a full pardon. And the guy's a fentanyl dealer. So don't tell me that this guy is all about stopping drugs and getting them off of our streets at all costs, because that's not the case. It depends on who you are. If you have the influence, you get a pardon. If you don't have the influence, you get a hood thrown over your head from your bedroom and hauled onto a helicopter and transported to the United States and thrown in jail. Now, I'm not saying that that guy needed to go. He needed to be out of power because he's doing bad things to good people. I'm not saying that. The tactic that we use, I just think there's no guardrails when you start policy like that. And now that's policy. Now the United States is capable, in the worldview, the United States is capable of performing a military action where they go in and extract a foreign head of state and remove them from power and bring them over here to stand trial.
Well, Mike, that's not the first time we've done that. I mean, let's face it.
That's the
We've
first
been we've
time
been
Trump's
stealing
done it.
Central, South American, and Caribbean islands forever. The Monroe Doctrine's been around for a long time, and we that has been our policy for a long time. He's not the first, and I'm sure he won't be the last, where he meddles into the affairs of our hemisphere. We do it all the time. Now, I don't necessarily think that it's the right thing to do. And let's face it, the CIA has made some mistakes over the years. We backed the wrong people. We've done that multiple times, but we are in a situation where there's a changing global order. There's no question about that. And I think the rules that have been in place are going by the wayside, and it's a very scary time in the history of mankind as a new global order is established. The Bretton Woods order that the U.S. established following World War II was always going to end. The U.S. Navy cannot patrol the world's oceans forever. We can't. We don't have the resources that we did. Our economy wasn't big as everybody else's combined like it was at the end of World War II. And we frankly don't have the numbers in our Navy to continue to do it. No one else has the ability to step into that role. So
So
that
if you
part, global is
hang on. If you extrapolate that line of thought out and you say, okay, we can't afford to be the world's peacekeepers and keep uh, uh, a presence in all these other oceans and around these other. So once we take over Venezuela and we're in charge of the oil, which is what this is about, once we're in charge of that country and their oil exports, who's going to be in charge? How do we fund running another government? Because we're going to have people on the ground in Venezuela to make sure that things are going the way we need them to go, that those oil pipelines are pointed in the right direction. We need to have people.
I do not believe we'll have a long-term military presence in Venezuela. I don't believe that for 1 minute.
Well,
I don't believe that.
it'll be there till the oil runs out. And what about Greenland?
Western companies will be there to extract oil. There's no doubt about that.
Well, somebody's going to have
There's
to
no doubt.
protect them, Tom. We're going to have a police force there to make sure that the oil executives that are visiting the refineries are safe and protected, because we're not, there are other people that are not happy about what the United States did over there, and they're looking for an opportunity to square that back up again. So we're going to have some military, paramilitary, Halliburton presence over there in order to make sure that things go the way we need them to go. There's no use overthrowing a country and taking their gross national product away from them without having the ability to keep it. And what happens when we invade Greenland? Because we need to put a Star Wars base there in order to make this Iron Dome.
Deal is already. We're not going to have to invade Greenland. The Dutch are going to allow us to. I'm sure that there's some mineral rights deal that we'll sign with them, and they're going to allow us to put the military bases we need.
We already
We're not
have an
going.
agreement with them that we can put as many military bases on Greenland as we need. So why is he threatening to invade it?
Trump, if you read the art of the deal, you'll see very clearly that his philosophy has always been you start off bombastic, you start off making big demands, you start off in a position of power, and then when they cede any point, you back down. And you try to find that middle ground so that you wind up with what you really wanted at the start of these things. Trump has done this time and time and time again, and yet everybody is shocked when he does it. I don't know why everybody's shocked. Yes, he comes out and makes these
Because it's our
bombastic statements.
president that's doing
Don't
it, not the guy that wrote the book.
Yes, same guy. It's the same guy. He is who he is. And I don't like it, but it is who he is. I don't know why we haven't adjusted. This is what he's going to do. And the sooner that the European leaders realize who they're dealing with and make some adjustments in the way that they're doing it, because he is the president of the United States and he does have a lot of power, deal with it. Know that this is what he's doing. Give him a little bit. Give him something that you were going to give us anyway. Have him come back to the median. The countries that have done that have wound up with really good trade deals. They wind up on the plus side of this thing.
And the ones that don't get tariffed out of the market.
Pretty much. We have been taken advantage of for a long time on tariffs. We have been taken advantage of consistently. We're on the bottom side and we've given up everything. Why? Because we wanted everybody to be part of our world order, that Bretton Woods thing that we set up. We give you access to our markets. We would allow you to dump your goods in here. We would keep the American currency very strong. I think there's a reason that our currency has gone backwards 9% over the course of the last year. I think Trump is allowing a slight devaluation of American currency because it's a huge benefit to American manufacturing. It makes our goods much cheaper overseas. And I really think you're going to start to see the pendulum start to swing on our trade deficit, which is good for the American economy. When it goes up, manufacturing goes up, more plants are built, more people are employed. It's a good thing for everybody. And you're starting to see something that we had not seen in a long time. You're starting to see some of the critical industries that lead to national defense come back to the United States. We were not the company or the country that was building ships. We are not the country that was building steel. How did we win World War II? We won World War II because we could build ships faster than anybody else. We could build tanks and planes and munitions and everything else faster than anybody else. Nobody could keep up. We were a juggernaut. We were the sleeping giant that everybody was Yamamoto was so afraid of when he said, we'll have 6 months. Let's get it all done in 6 months. Because in 6 months, they're going to completely overwhelm us. And we did. And now we've given up all of that. We have everybody else making that stuff for us. That's not a position you can be in. That is not a position of strength. We should be able to make our own stuff. And Trump's doing a lot of things that are helping that out. And tariffs is a piece of that. That's how you have companies return stuff back here. There is a reason that so many semiconductor plants are being built in the United States right now. And that's because of a lot of the stuff that's going on. So I think it's a net positive. I'm not saying I agree with everything Trump does. I don't. There's a lot of things. I don't believe that as Christians, we should look at somebody with Trump's personality and think that this is a rock solid Christian because God asks us to be humble. And I don't know if there's a humble bone in that man's body, but he's doing a lot of things. And I don't agree with some of the stuff that's happening, but a lot of things that he's doing are going to wind up long term being very good for our country. And so I'm willing to see what Trump brings to the table and think, all right, I have to hold my nose through some of this. But at the end of the day, he's doing a lot of good things. And I think that people, just because it's Trump, everybody on the left, everybody that didn't vote for him, anybody that's not a Trump person, they hate everything he does. And everything he does has to be opposed. And so you wind up on the wrong side of so many things. So I don't know. I just that's my personal opinion. That's what I'm reading right now. That's what I'm seeing. And I don't know. At the end of the day, I think at this stage of our country's history and where things are going at in the world, we unfortunately need somebody like Trump to help us through these next 4 years.
Well, the comment about having to hold your nose, I think because the right, the church, small c, the church has so wrapped ourselves up with this administration and Trump as the president that anything he does, good or bad, he takes the church with it. So if he does something good and it's positive, the church benefits from it. The problem is when he does something deplorable or unchristian, he takes the church with it and he takes Christians with the church. And there are those of us that are standing on the sidelines watching what's going on and saying, wait a minute, I'm supposed to get behind this. I'm supposed to, as a Christian, a professed Christian, I'm witnessing to people at work. And in the conversation, we talk about some of the things that are going on. And I'm supposed to say, yeah, but on the upside, he has this other side of him that's going to make our economy grow and we're going to make more money and we're going to build more ships. So we're on the right trajectory on the other side of all this. But yeah, we have to deal with all of the stuff that goes on with it. A convicted sex offender, and he's been married 3 times, and I just hit personal morality compass, and I'm not making it about just that. But as a Christian, as a person of faith, I have to be able to justify that part of his character with who I'm saying I support, and I struggle with that. And because I struggle with it, I get pushed over to the side. Well, maybe you need to just listen more because you're missing something. And I ask God, remove the scales from my eyes because my biggest lament at night when I put my head on my pillow is, God, what am I missing that all of the people I love and care about are seeing that I'm not seeing? Why are they all in on President Trump and what he's doing, good and bad, deplorable or beneficial? They're all in on this guy and they're willing to look past. How many times in this conversation, Tom, have we said, well, yeah, I don't agree with that, but well, that's not really the way I would do it. So, at what point does that bag of butts and icks and oohs build up enough to where you say, I, I, I can't lift that bag over my shoulder
Yeah.
and carry it? And why do I feel like I'm the one that's got it wrong because I'm struggling with the fact that my compass says I don't see Jesus in any decision he makes at all. I don't see the fruit of somebody living a Christ-like life. And I don't see, and I'm not saying that as president, he has to be my Jesus representative. I don't need to see, I'm not comparing the two of them, but there has to be fruit. There has to be some inkling of the fact that he is following the teachings or I don't know, Tom. That's my I spend most of my days depressed where it comes to having to talk about anything having to do with government or leadership or the cabinet positions and these people that we have running the country that just have no respect or no empathy or no soft heart for Americans because you live in a blue city or a red city or you live in a blue state or a red state. You're following MAGA and the Trump playbook or you're not. and it is a black and white 7-foot wall that you have to get over in order to be on one side or the other. And I am clearly on the other side. In my family, in my church, in my a group of influence, my friends, you are either on board and you're on the train and things are going this way, or you are not. And it is clear. And it's never been more clear than what it is right now. I have disagreed politically with many members of my family over the last 30 years. Not seen eye, not even eye to eye. We've had our own personal differences as far as the direction we think our country should be going. I've never felt like that was dovetailing closer and closer together than I have over the last 10 years until Donald Trump came into the picture, till he rode the escalator. And from that day till this day, that chasm has gotten so wide that I feel like I'm not a Christian anymore because I don't see it the way everybody else that I care about. I care about their opinion. Some of the smartest people I know are people that I am close to, and I don't agree with anything that they have to say about what we're doing government wise. That 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 creates a heartache in me that it's hard to it's in fact it's hard to even put into words. I can't even quantify it. In that I spend much of my prayer time saying, God, clearly I am missing it. I am not seeing it the way my family sees it, my friends see it, the people that I care about see it, and it leads me to that point where I say I have a hard time trusting the people that I sit in church with because I know that inside we are diametrically opposed as to how we think the conservative church government movement should be going. We're steering two different boats.
Mike, and I'm again, I said it earlier, I'll say it again. I'm saddened that's the position that you're in. Because at the end of the day, again, I'll say it, Jesus is not Democrat, he's not Republican, and you aren't more or less Christian because you vote one way or the other. There are, I see some really good Christian principles in both parties. When I see the Democratic Party, I do see that more socially liberal side that is all about the Beatitudes and taking care of those in need and those types of things. And I think that those are tenets that should be a part of both parties. And I see that as being a very important thing. When I see the Republican Party and I see that love of life, the anti-abortion, pro-choice type of thing, I think that's a very Christian thing. And there's a lot of those things on both sides. One party will never represent a complex person like you or me. I'm not 100% Republican. If you looked at a line and said 100 is the most conservative Republican and 0 is the most liberal Democrat, I think most of the country is in that 48 to 52. I think that's where we live when we look at it. Now, they want to draw so farther and farther apart. And I think social media has exacerbated that. I think the political climate exacerbates that. I think politicians, knowing that by getting us all amped up, they're going to get more campaign contributions. I think that contributes to it. And so there's a lot of things. And then the fight between CNN and MSNBC on one side and Fox on the other, that exacerbates it. There's so many things going on today that are pulling us apart. At the end of the day, the things that lock us together are way more important than politics. Jesus Christ should be the basis of the relationship between you and your friends at church. It shouldn't be about politics. And to think that I'm more Christian because I voted for Donald Trump, I think is almost as laughable as the other side saying that you'd be less Christian because you didn't. Neither is true. We are Christ-like because of our relationship with Jesus Christ. And the two most important things is that we know him and we love God more and we love others. And so I think you have a lot of really good points on this. And I am hurt by the fact that you're hurt because of the way people are treating you because of your political leaning. That should not happen. I don't feel one last bit of love for you. And I think I really respect your opinion. That's why I wanted to do this. That's why I wanted to hit the subject because I respect what you have to say and I respect your point of view. And again, do I think that my mind's been completely changed? No, but I love the fact that I feel like I better understand where you're coming from. I feel I better understand your side of it and what you're seeing. And there's some things that I'm going to go and research on, because of things you said today, because I want to know more. And I think if that's what this is about, if our discussions are about that, and we can, just get the other person to research more and understand the other side better, then I think we wind up all better from that. So I'm glad we chose these subjects today. I'm glad this is what we tackled, because I think it's a very difficult subject to take on. And I hope that we presented this in a loving, kind manner. I hope that that's what we continue to do, because I can tell you, I don't feel one bit less love for you, one bit less respect for you because of your political opinion. And I think the church has to realize that too. That my church, when I go to it, they really don't talk politics. They don't talk about who to vote for. They don't talk about what's going on anywhere. They talk about Jesus Christ saved for your, died for your sins. That they preach the gospel. And I don't feel like if I was a Democrat and walked in there that I would feel any less a part of the congregation. But the fact you're going through that, it does. It hurts me. It really does.
So it's not
Nope,
even
now I hear you.
Democrat, Republican. It's like you said with Pastor Brad. Well, Mike's more liberal leaning, and I'm more conservative leaning. It's like no, no. I'm a conservative. I'm just not the same conservative as you are. Where it comes to how we're tying the church to politics, you say Jesus isn't Republican. Well, Republicans think that. Conservatives think that Jesus is on our side, and we're going to make society right by doing things a certain way in keeping with the teachings of Jesus. Well, yes, that Scripture tells us that, but
Have I
not
ever
to the
said,
exclusion, huh?
I said, have I ever said that? Have I ever made the statement that I believed I'm more Christian because I voted for Trump, or I voted Republican, or anything
No,
like that?
no, you didn't. Your statement to Brad was Mike's more liberal leaning and I'm more conservative leaning, and I'm like, well, no, time out, hang on, it's not that line in the sand. It's more a fact of we agree on more than what we disagree on where it comes to the church's responsibility in
I agree.
society. I think the problem stems from the fact that the church has tied politics to Trump to politics. And that is where I have the problem is that if it doesn't go along with the MAGA agenda, then it's not Christian or the church isn't behind it or it can't be of God. My challenge is I look to see how do I draw my responsibility as a Christian is to draw others to a loving knowledge of Jesus and who Jesus is and the saving grace that comes with it. How do I do that if I'm constantly being drawn into a conversation of what our president is doing in the name of Jesus? He held the Bible up in front of the church across the street from the White House. He professes his favorite. He doesn't have a favorite verse, but he likes the Old Testament, New Testament the same. So he's using all the right words to draw people in. So, I'm not making a joke. Well, I am, but the truth is, if he identifies as a Christian, then people are looking for evidence or fruit of the fact that he's following Jesus or following Scripture. And it makes it hard for me as a Christian to draw others to Jesus when you have to untie the MAGA, Trump, Republican, governmental element to it. Because that's what people want to talk about, because he's in the news every day, everywhere. Like I said, the static noise, the bar of chaos is so high that it's permeated everything. UFC is going to have a match at the White House, which I struggle with. Mixed martial art fight at the White House with 100,000 seat stadium being built for it makes no sense to me at all. But because that's part of the vernacular, that's the language, that's what's being talked about right now. Is anytime you want to talk about the church, well, you're going to have to talk about politics because we bound those two things together. And I don't know that there in the next 3 years, there's going to be a come a time where you could talk about one without the other. And that's problematic for me. It makes everything that I believe, everything that I follow, everything that I learned about how to be a Christian up until right now is being challenged by the leader of our country. Well, Donald Trump does it this way. Well, Trump said this. Okay, well, I have to fight against that or get around that in order to be a Christian and draw others to Christ. Well, the marginalized, the folks in our society that are seeking or trying to find their foothold or their stronghold, I want to show them that Jesus loves them too. Jesus loves everybody. He created all, he
Yes.
loves all. He wants you to be a member of his family and he wants you in heaven. So my job is to reach out to those. Well, that flies in the face of what, you know, the current administration is working towards. If you're brown, we have to then take another look at you. We're going to have to see your papers. If you're an LGBTQ person, well, you want to dress like a cat and use a litter box, and you can't be a gay person and be a Christian. So what does that tell the LGBTQ community member about what is going on in America right now? It tells them they don't have a place. They don't belong. Well, Jesus would differ with that. He would say differently. He loves gay people. Okay, so what am I supposed to do with that? I'm supposed to draw them in.
And I think that's what we're called to do. And if Jesus is in flesh and blood right now, that's who he sought out. He sought out all the marginalized people. That's who he hung out with. The tax collectors, those they were spit upon. I mean, anybody that lend money back then, that was something that was below. Go right down the list of all the people he hung around with, the prostitutes, everybody else. It was everybody that was marginalized in society, and that is part of our mission field. 100% cannot agree with you more than on all those points. Now, Jesus would ask that you come follow me, leave all those things behind and come follow me. There is a piece of that. He wants to reach out and bring everybody in. And that love is so universal. And I don't want to, get too far down this road, but you have to be loving. You have to be somebody that's reaching them. But if somebody's in a lifestyle of sin, I think you do need to try to pull them from that. All that to be said, I don't think we should be demonizing anybody in our society. I don't think that anybody should be made to feel less than what they are or anything like that. But I do not take any of my Christian values from the Republican Party, and I don't think anybody should. That's why the Gospels never talk about how he voted in an election. They never talked about his political beliefs. They never talked about any of that stuff because that stuff doesn't matter to God. It doesn't matter to Jesus. Let it all burn. So I think we put too much of an emphasis on politics in the church. It shouldn't be something that drives what we're doing. People, reaching people should be what we're about. Being kind, being compassionate, all those things, drawing people in. And anything that we're out there doing that's driving people away should be stopped. And if people are walking towards the doors because they voted one way, that's a problem. That's a fundamental issue. And we need to reconnect from that. I don't feel that at my church. So I'm not seeing this. But the fact that you're seeing it, you're feeling it, that hurts me.